Happy New Year, Trojan fans. 2024 is going to be a great year.
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Holkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC your first listen every day, as well as your first listen of the new year. Whether you're watching the show on YouTube or wherever you're going to download your podcast, remember the show is free, and always remember how much I appreciate your support. If you're watching on YouTube, become a subscriber. It's quick, it's easy, it's free. When you see the thumbs up, you need to smash it, make it go down. Don't forget to hit that bell notification button. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on and you can get started today. 2023 is behind us. Check the rearview mirror. And look, if I'm wiser, everybody is a little bit wiser from our experience that we had together this past season, right? Heading into the new year, it's a time for resolve, to make a resolution. And let's hold ourselves to it. We're going to hold the USC football team to some resolutions as well. In 2024, USC football will not go back to playing defense like they did in 2023. That is resolution number one, first and foremost. And we're going to hold them to it because what they showed us in the Holiday Bowl is they can play defense. They know what to do. The offense under Miller Moss, it's going to continue to be disciplined, and they're going to use their big play capabilities just to kill the opponent. Every play doesn't have to be a big play. Just perform like you did against Louisville's top defense. That Holiday Bowl, that win, I think it taught us a lot. Number one, there's still a lot of work to be done before USC heads down to Las Vegas and kicks off against LSU. However, we did learn that, most importantly, USC has a starting quarterback. There is going to be life after Caleb Williams. And you know what? I didn't need to see or watch practices to know what Miller Moss was capable of doing. I saw some of his stuff as a true freshman back in 2021. At the end of the year, under duress, under less than ideal circumstances. And then when he got into the games this season early, the first half of the year, I saw enough from Miller to say, all right, you know what? His game has actually grown. He's more than just a passer. He knows how to use his legs when he needs to. But Coach Riley still needs to get depth at the quarterback spot through the transfer portal. But make no mistake, it's Miller time. He is USC's starting quarterback. Brendan Rice, Taj Washington, they're going to be playing in the NFL this fall. Maybe not with Caleb on the same team, although that would be pretty cool. All three of them are going to be in the NFL in 2024. However, Deuce Robinson isn't. Zachariah Branch, Mekhi Lemon, Jacoby Lane, they're going to be sophomores at USC, and they're going to be playing with a lot of confidence because of what they were able to do in the Holiday Bowl. They weren't relying on Brendan Rice and Taj Washington to bail them out. Taj got them started, but the wide receivers in that bowl game, they were the highlight. Not to take anything away from Taj, because he was his own selfless self playing in that game to begin with. So again, you've got those four sophomores returning, and plus I believe Dorian Singer is coming back. You got a few others that are on board, the freshmen. USC is going to be just fine. So you've got your starting quarterback, you've got your wide receiver group. I'm really hoping that Lake McCree will be healthy soon. But look, next man up, right? Carson Tabarachi, that was a nice catch and run. How much more of that will we see in 2024? I mean, the tight end room could be called upon to be play a bigger role, because while the offense looked its best that they had all season long in that bowl game, going up against a really good defense, there is still a piece of the offense that it needs to be more consistent. And so while it looked great against Louisville on the whole, the offense has to get better, starting with the running game. And that obviously is going to start up front with the offensive line. Once again, the Holiday Bowl with a freshman starting at left tackle and Jonah Monheim starting inside at right guard, the offense had their strongest game of the season, as well as the offensive line. So right now, Jonah's on the clock. The NFL needs an answer sooner than later. They want to get their all-star game rosters, the Shrine Game, those type of rosters set soon. Jonah has till January 15th to make his decision known, whether he's going to forego his last year of eligibility and jump into the NFL, or he's going to return to USC. He's got a couple of weeks. If he does come back, we saw what we already knew. Jonah's best position is going to be on the inside, whether it's left guard, center, or right guard. It's not tackle. And he didn't play poorly at left tackle, but he was USC's best option in 2023. His best option and his best position is inside. So he's in a tough spot right now. If he's going to play another year inside, is his draft stock going to, is he going to increase his draft stock? What he has to weigh that up against is the risk and the wear and tear of playing another year in college. If he decides to come back, USC's name, image, likeness collectives, they're going to have to pay. It's going to cost, and it should, because you're asking Jonah to take a sizable risk. He can go to the NFL right now. He could probably get drafted somewhere between the 4th and the 6th round. But if he comes back and plays an entire year inside, who knows? Maybe he's now a second rounder. It's a big difference in money being drafted on day 2 versus day 3. Big difference. So again, the O-line and the run blocking, they need to show more improvement by the time USC gets ready to play their first game against LSU. But the way that they finish the season in the bowl game, well, I'm hoping that euphoria that everyone is feeling, it's lingering around. I hope that lingers all the way through to the spring game. I'm not sure when that's going to be, but you do know. When I know, you'll know. Once that date is announced, it's going to be one of the first things all over social media. So you won't even have to wait for me to tell you. I'll let you know. So let's kiss 2023 goodbye. We can kiss goodbye the offense that had no identity other than Caleb Williams trying to will USC's team to a win. That's who they were. We can say goodbye to USC's offense that had all those illegal procedure penalties and the poor clock management and all those late substitution patterns. Whatever worked in 2022 for USC on offense, it didn't necessarily work in 2023. At least not for Caleb. And I'm not blaming Caleb solely for the offense's woes this past season. I think most of the offense's struggles in 23 were more mental than physical. But you combine, what Caleb Williams was trying to reproduce 1 year after leading the team to 11 wins and winning the Heisman, and trying to make sure that the offense was perfect because the defense wasn't perfect. I think that really weighed on his game. And instead of just playing and reacting, The whole team, it was more paralysis by analysis. They were overthinking. They weren't playing anymore. So I just want to welcome 2024 with open arms. Come on in. New beginning. The Holiday Bowl showed us what 2023 was supposed to be all about. It's a new year. It's going to be a much better year. And I think USC is going to be resolved to play like they did in their bowl game as opposed to how they did in their first bowl games of the season. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers, you're going to get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app is really easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet. Like, they have same game parlays, same game. You can find bets in the new Explore tab. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, and that's the best way to find popular parlay bets. And it's also not a way to say that word 3 times fast. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make your first bet an easy score. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts on Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24 hours, 7 days a week streaming channel. I got a question. How many of you watched the bowl games over the weekend? Specifically, Penn State versus Ole Miss, Ohio State versus Missouri. Were you entertained? Were you kind of why were you watching those games? I know why I was watching. I wanted to see why everybody's nervous about USC having to go up against the Ohio States and the Penn States once they join the big conference. After watching those two games, I'm not as concerned as I was prior to those games. This is what I'll say. At least Penn State was able to move the ball against Ole Miss in their loss. The Nittany Lions, they were playing with a freshman quarterback who's supposed to be pretty good. But for whatever reason, James Franklin, his program, he's lacking some playmakers on the outside, running back. And he was just asking way too much of their quarterback. Couldn't get it done. So like I said, they need, if you're not going to have a better supporting cast on the outside, you better have a really good starting quarterback. And more importantly, you better have a really good backup quarterback. Fortunately, USC had both. They had Caleb Williams and they had Miller Moss. In that bowl game between Penn State and Ole Miss, the Ole Miss defender, they were just pinning their ears back. They forced the Nittany Lions, their quarterback, Kevin Allar, he had to be accurate. And he had to be on time. He had to get the ball out quickly. Then he wasn't close with any of that. So, look, we know that there's that argument, defense or offense. I think we've turned the corner. No longer do you have to have great defenses. You have to have a good defense. You just have to have a defense that's functional, that tackles, that gets you the ball back a few times during the game. Nick Saban has already turned that page. And if that game was enough for you to be convinced, you want to talk about wasting a really good defense? If you watch the Ohio State-Missouri game, how about this? The Buckeyes took a 3-0 lead into the fourth quarter. They lost the game 14-3. Yeah. The Buckeyes lost. They scored 3 points. Look, I know USC had some struggles on offense, and they definitely struggled on defense. But even in their worst game of the season, they're able to score more than a field goal. That game between the Missouri Tigers and the Ohio State Buckeyes, it had almost as many punts as points. 16 punts combined, 17 points combined between the two teams. Yawn. Yeah. Reminder, Ohio State was undefeated before they lost to Michigan in the conference championship game. Excuse me, before they lost to Michigan, Michigan played Iowa in the conference championship game. So now Ohio State is riding a 2-game losing streak. In the bowl game, Ohio State was playing without their starting quarterback, Kyle McCord, who, oh, by the way, started every game last year, this past season, but he took his talents to Syracuse. He jumped in the transfer portal. He has already landed in New York. Their backup quarterback, Devin Brown, name is slightly familiar to USC fans. He was once committed to USC and Clay Helton. Well, he took over, and then he left the game. He was the starter in their bowl game. He got knocked out due to an ankle injury. USC played without their starting quarterback. Okay, they played with their backup, Miller Moss. Malachi Nelson wasn't available. He took himself out of the bowl game by just throwing himself on the transfer portal. We know that Brendan Rice wasn't out there, and we know that Michael Jackson wasn't out there. They took themselves out of the game because they're getting themselves ready. One's going to the NFL, one's in the transfer portal. But USC's offense survived. It flourished. Ohio State was also playing without their number one wide receiver, Marvin Harrison Jr. Again, Ohio State, best wide receiving group in the country, right? Bunch of 5 stars across the board. Every single one of them. What happens? You take one out, all of a sudden the whole team can't play? I would bring up Florida State as well, because they were without their starting quarterback and they were down to their second or third string backup quarterback. But that team didn't even want to play against Georgia. And it didn't matter who they were playing in their bowl game. They didn't want to play. And Kirby Smart, Georgia's head coach, even made that comment after the game. Georgia they took the Seminoles behind the woodshed 63-3. So Kirby Smart's like, hey, you know what? I looked across the field. Those guys didn't want to be there. He didn't say those exact words, but that's exactly what he was implying. So what am I saying? What is more important today, defense or offense? Well, if we're using those 2 games, the Ohio State and the Penn State bowl games, all 4 teams in that game played great defense. But it wasn't the defense that made the offenses look bad. It was a lack of having a good quarterback. And in those cases, it was a lack of having a good backup quarterback. I think it was proven true in those games. Louisville had a really good defense. The vast majority of their players on defense played in that bowl game. They were missing their 2 best players on offense. USC's offense turned Louisville's defense into Swiss cheese. And they did it without a running game. They did it with a, finger quotes, backup quarterback who was a legitimate starter on, I would say, 95% of the Power 5 teams in college football. Miller Moss is that good. Jackson Dart was the difference in the game between Penn State and Ole Miss. He was able to do enough on offense to beat Penn State's defense. He was the difference. And had Penn State's quarterback been better, had better wide receivers to throw to, they probably win that game because their defense was better than Ole Miss's. Not that much better. The difference was on offense. All USC needed in 2023, and I'm going to say to a lesser extent in 22, just so they could make the playoffs, was a defense. Not a great defense, not an above average defense, just a defense. Again, not great, not top shelf, just a defense that looked like it did in the Holiday Bowl. I'd imagine they had what they needed on defense in 2023. They had the personnel, especially once they stopped moving around before the snap of the ball. And definitely once Taylor Mays was put in charge of tackling. I mean, I think about USC's defense in the Holiday Bowl. If they had that level all year long in 2023, holding their opponents to 28 points, I said it in my instant reaction show after the Holiday Bowl. We're not having this feel-good feeling right now. We're probably having it on New Year's Day or later. Well, we're definitely having it on New Year's Day because that's when the New Year's Day bowl games and the 2 playoff games are being played. No, I keep hearing and reading excuses as to why Ohio State and Penn State lost their games. You know, and a lot of it's due to opt-outs and those teams going through coaching changes. Funny. No one at USC used those excuses. They had 24 opt-outs. They're changing their defensive coaching staff. They seem to do okay. I think the culture at USC, while not great, I think there's a strong enough culture in that locker room that once everybody figured out, all right, this is who's going to be playing the bowl game, they came together. They rallied around their quarterback. Their offense did what they had to do. And the defense said, you know what? What Jacoby Covington said, we a team now. We a team now. So last week, I told you I was going to read some viewer comments, and things just kind of sped up, snowballed. Everything kind of got on top of each other as far as, you know, player movement, coaching changes, yada, yada, yada. And then all of a sudden, the bowl game was here. So I figured, you know what? Let's use this third segment of the first show of the new year. I want to read a couple of comments. One in particular, this one's from Dan Berman. He had some feelings, and he wrote out a really long comment on the last show. So I figured, you know what? I'll address it. And the reason I'm addressing it on the show rather than typing it out is I hate typing. So if you're going to ask me a question, try and shorten it up a little bit because I feel obliged to address each point. So I'll do my best. Here we go. I think Dan Berman has some feelings that he wants to work through right now. This is what he said. Number one, coaching. I believe Riley was coaching scared all year long, placating to Alex Grinch and certain players, not stepping in to bring common sense to very poor coaching and schemes of Alex, along with allowing him to play favorites. Look, I don't know about coaching scared. I'll say that, you know, maybe Lincoln Riley succumbed to the pressure a little bit, and that probably got to him at times. But I do agree that he should have stepped in much sooner once the defense showed that no signs of improving throughout the year. Once we got to that Colorado game, Arizona, around that fifth or sixth game of the year, Yeah, that's when Lincoln Riley should have said, you know what, Alex, we're doing something different. I agree with you there. Dan continued. In addition, Riley allowed Caleb to freelance too much, which caused stupid delay of game and holding penalties. Caleb's, I believe, ego got in his way to hold the ball too long, not hitting short passes instead of going for home runs. Okay. I've heard that argument, and I've made the same one throughout the year. So you need to be able to tell me which times, though, Caleb was at fault and which times it was Lincoln Riley's fault. There's a lot of finger pointing to go around. Remember, when you point one finger, check it out. 1, 2, 3, they're pointing right back at you. So, yeah, look, did Caleb play as well in his second season at USC as he did in his first season? Statistically, the numbers were close. But when you're watching it, it didn't look anything close. We could point the finger as to why. At this point, I don't think it matters. I'll say the same thing I said about Lincoln Riley. I think Caleb succumbed to the pressure. Everyone knew that USC's defense was a challenge, was a struggle. I think he was trying to do too much. And he went on about culture. With Riley not stepping in and taking responsibility, and I'm paraphrasing, keeping Grinch and Caleb on shorter leashes, it caused a very toxic culture within the team. The players must have thought there is no leadership with Riley to do the right thing. We are a team, not a bunch of egos who think it is their way or the highway, or without us, the team is nothing. Over time, players said, screw this. We're either going to get ours, leave for a better opportunity, or we saw play with no heart, teamwork. I think he's getting into his feelings and he started to ramble. Look, Dan, I'm sure there were unhappy players who thought they should have been playing. But look, be more specific. Besides Caleb, who else are you talking about? And then one last thing Dan continued with. This was compounded by keeping the players silent from the media. You know what you said. I'm not going to read a whole bunch more of this. This is what I'm going to say. The truth lies somewhere in the middle. The players weren't muzzled. It doesn't matter who the head coach is at USC. Players are always going to toe the company line. They are taught to speak to the media a certain way. Team first, me second. They're not going to throw anybody under the bus. So, Dan, I understand where you're coming from. You might feel that Lincoln Riley was full of crap and that eventually the team collectively just said, we're out of here. I think you're oversimplifying. When the team wasn't winning, things kind of snowballed. But let's just get beyond. We're in 2024 now. If you need validation that the team didn't rally around Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams, to a certain extent, yes, you're right. Do you feel better? But I'm not going to get into all the ins and outs because I don't think we're going to accomplish anything. You want to feel validated that you saw something different? We all did. You don't need me to tell you that. The truth lies somewhere in the middle. Again, it doesn't matter who the head coach is. Players are always going to cover up for themselves. They're always going to cover the team. It's not like someone was looking around saying, "Ooh, no one's watching." Oh, pss, 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 pss. It's not going to happen. Let me move forward. Again, Dan, you had a lot to say. I think you started to ramble a little bit and dial it back a little bit. If you feel that way, great. You don't need me to validate it. This one came from Iggy Mont 05. And by the way, Dan, like I said, you don't need my validation. Listen to my show more often, more closely. Especially your point about Jen having a come to Jesus meeting with Lincoln. If you remember, I was one of the first people in the media to put that out there before it happened and why it needed to happen. Anyways, I digress. See, now you got me upset, Dan. 2024 is going to be a great season. Hey, This one's from Iggy Mont 05. Mr. Culkin. First of all, everybody stop calling me Mr. Culkin. Mark is fine. Do you have any insight on what was going on in the locker room this year? SC looked like a totally different team. Did we have too many me guys instead of team guys? What do you think? What does your gut tell you? Look, there's going to be a time and a place. We'll get into that. But let's not dwell on the past. Okay? We're moving forward. From Josh Thomas, 7207. Hey, Mark, great show as always. I think Miller showed what us diehards already knew. Just not sure why Lincoln Riley was so hesitant. My question to you is, as a team, are we better without Caleb? I love Caleb, and I totally know how great he is, but something just felt different with Miller than Caleb. I know the O-line changes were huge this game. I know that. But I kind of feel like the players believed in Miller more than I've seen with Caleb. All right, folks, I picked the questions, but I chose these questions for a reason. Everybody seems to kind of jump on the same narrative all at the same time. USC would not be where they are without Caleb Williams. We'll have a show, and we'll dissect Caleb Williams. We'll peel back the layers. He's still part of the team, by the way. He hasn't made his declaration yet. So, everybody, let's stop looking for the scapegoat already. Anyways, I'm going to stop now. I want to get out of here. I want to enjoy 2024, the first day. I'll be back with another episode. Hopefully without this nagging cough. I do apologize. But until the next episode, everyone, have a happy new year. Enjoy the new year. 2024 is going to be a great season. Until then, everyone, you know what to do.